Hey future managers, I wanted to take some time this week to talk to you about global supply chain careers. I alluded a little bit in the last video as to what a booming field it is, but I wanted to give you guys a little bit more information about some of the different career paths you can do in the supply chain, and then also just what a fantastic career it is. Okay, so first thing I want to bring up to you guys is, what is a supply chain manager do? I talked to you guys a little bit about it, but this slide kind of really sums it up. So, supply chain profession is basically all of the planning activities and the management of all the activities in sourcing and procurement. We talked about that. Conversion, another word for conversion is manufacturing. Conversion is when we're converting all of the raw materials into that finished product. That's manufacturing. And then also all logistics management activities. Here's the thing, supply chain is big on communication, and that's one reason I talk to you guys a lot about communication in this class as well, because it's a really important skill that managers have, whether in supply chain or not, but it includes a lot of coordination. Supply chain literally is kind of like a spider web. You talk to everybody, and that's one reason that I really loved it, is that you are talking to everybody from the lowest part of the organization to the highest part of the organization. You're talking to people in your organization, out of your organization. You're concerned about what's going on inside the organization environmentally and then also outside, and you're always trying to benchmark and improve yourself. But it's a lot of coordinating and collaboration with partners, suppliers, intermediaries, service providers, and then also you have to keep a pulse on what your customer wants in regards to a timeline, in regards to pricing. All that stuff comes back to and affects the supply chain. So the supply chain field has a lot of different gaps. You don't just step in one day and become a supply chain manager. Usually you'll start in one of the three areas of sourcing, manufacturing, or logistics. And after you've worked in all three areas, then you're usually ready to step into a managerial role, or there's certain subsets where people can spend their entire careers in one of these subsets. This is a very vague visual that I have for you guys, but I want you guys to know that they're all really, really important assets. We've talked about logistics, we've talked a little about product lifecycle management and some of that reverse logistics and how do we design for success. We've talked about procurement. Asset management is important, and I'm going to save that one for the next slide because I want to talk about it, but that's actually the HR side of supply chain, because there's a huge need right now for supply chain professionals, and we'll talk more about that in the next minute. But how do we keep a good flow of people that have the right mindset and also have the right drive in that field and keep them growing and moving and learning and growing, like we learned about with Maslow. Also, we have supply chain enterprise applications. Big data and being able to analyze big data is a really important skill in supply chain, because there's just so much data and you need to be able to understand the tools that are in supply chain. So I've worked with everything from the oldest DOS programs, which, believe it or not, are actually more reliable than some of the brand new SAP and Oracle programs and some of the specialty programs that are out there. But being able to utilize big data to help you manage the supply chain is pivotal. There's a ton of jobs in that. If that's something, the analytics is interesting to you, big need in supply chain. And there's also planning. Planners are, I consider them like somebody you lean on, because they're going to tell you, this is the data has to come into the shop, this is the data has to come out of the shop, and they really are driving a lot of what goes on in the shop. So you have to be very, very cognizant of your schedules, and planners think ahead about all that stuff and they keep you right on track. Very important job, but planning is done even in the supply chain. And again, people can dedicate their whole career to any of these. And then last is strategy. As you get further up in the supply chain organization, companies are starting to compete with their supply chains. Look at Amazon, for example, because they can get you something here in 2 days. That's why they're one of the leaders in the business right now. And being able to leverage your supply chain is really a great strength for a business. And you quickly can shoot right up and be talking to the vice president or the CEO in no time, been there. And being able to use your supply chain strategically is also a strength at the higher levels of your organization. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about what's going on in supply chain from an asset management or a talent perspective. All right, there is a continuous shortage of supply chain professionals, because not only is this profession becoming more and more important, there's also more and more jobs available. And guess what? Baby boomers are doing these jobs, and they're all retiring, even Gen Z. So there's a massive need, and there's just not enough people to fill the job. And part of the issue is supply chain professionals really can't decide on definition of supply chain, and so a lot of people don't know about it. So I'm trying to help you guys be aware of it, so that you guys, as you're planning your future careers, can be thinking about how important supply chain is. And if you're looking for a career field, maybe you want to research this a little bit more, or come talk to me. All right. But the supply chain management industry has a big issue in attracting and retaining people in the supply chain field. So they're trying to figure out how do they do that. One of the ways the industry is doing it is they're actually reaching out to colleges and saying, hey, can you start supply chain programs so that we have some sort of a pipeline for industry? Supply chain organizations are also starting to go into junior high and high school and share things about the supply chain so that students know about it earlier on, because unless you know about it, nobody really knows what happens behind the scenes because we're that good. We're kind of, sneaky behind the scenes. But there's a massive need. And so the big question is, how do we attract and retain millennial supply chain management talent? And you guys are Gen Z, and soon Gen Z is going to be taking over as well. So here's this quick visual. This is a couple years old, but I believe this is still pretty valid. I saw it was updated last year. So most companies, 60% of them have open positions in supply chain at any given time. Always jobs opening in supply chain. And then 15% of those jobs are continuously open after 6 months. So that means they've looked everywhere and they literally cannot find the right people to fill these jobs after 6 months, and they're just sitting open all the time. There's just jobs waiting for someone to come and fill them, and they can't find the right people with the right skill set. Isn't that crazy? So in the next 5 years, and right now we're probably down to about 3 years, there's going to be a big gap in supply chain professionals retiring. So what does that mean? You're going to have an even quicker opportunity to really rise up the ladder of supply chain management, because there's a lot of job openings at the top of the organization, and you're going to really be able to shoot right up. And honestly, only 18% of supply chain companies really have a strategy on how they're going to fill their talent gap. All right, so I'm telling you guys, there's a big opportunity here. So if you're big on opportunities, supply chain is definitely something to look into. So let's talk a little about supply chain strategy. I mentioned it above as one of the areas you can focus in, but supply chain strategy is really the driver of a firm decision on how they're going to develop, maintain, and then implement supply chain practices. So if that's done at the higher levels of an organization, I shared that businesses are now using their supply chains to compete. I already shared all this stuff already. And then also rising interest in supply chain is really showing strategically how important it is that we find the right people to fill these roles in the supply chain. And we'll talk a little bit more about what the skills are and what the right people are that supply chain managers are really looking for. And honestly, seeing the need for supply chain professionals and competent professionals and ones that are passionate about taking care of our world is one of the reasons that led me to teach. It's part of my dissertation. I'm very also much concerned about career satisfaction of supply chain professionals that are working in the field, and I'll share more about that in a minute. I just get so excited. I want to share everything right away. All right, so first of all, let's just talk about this. We talked about strategies, and let's just quick tie back to chapter 7. We talked about the business level strategies, right? We talked about the organizational level strategies, and then last, here's a new area that's above and beyond our textbook. That's the supply chain strategy. All right, so you guys can see how pivotal that is when we're looking at our bigger levels of strategy. Okay, let's keep rocking and rolling and talk about some supply chain skills. All right, so our skills, knowledge, and abilities are basically these things are basically how we can predict whether you're going to have a good job performance or not, and this is really the basis that we're using for hiring selections. So I want you guys to think about this and think about some of the things that I kind of try to fill in the gaps of my teaching, because you guys know I'm trying to teach you management, but I'm trying to teach you even more so how to be successful in the business world going forward. So some of that, professionalism, and then also, creating a good PowerPoint that flows, and, just all of the little things that I teach you guys. I hope you guys see that's above and beyond management, because a lot of those skills are what jobs are looking for. So what I'm sharing with you is about supply chain skills, but I'm telling you guys as managers, they're looking for these things as well. So what are they? Problem solving, most important skill for supply chain talent to enter the industry with. What are your problem solving skills? So if I was going into an interview as a supply chain, I would come with a story about how I solved a complex problem, because you are solving complex problems, a plethora of them day after day. Here's a quick example for you. So we had one of those big core shells that we were trying to transport, and it's so big it has to sit on the deck of one of those big ships that has all the shipping containers. It sits out on the deck with the shipping containers. Well, they hit a monsoon, and the thing slammed all around the ship, and it's a pressure vessel, right? Got all dented up, dinged up, lost some bars in the storm. And we had to figure out, once that came into port, we had to figure out, okay, can we use this? because we don't have spares of these sitting around. Each one is specifically customly made for every customer, and they can take 9 months to a year to build and to transport out to us. And then, can we build this? And then we realize, no, we really can't, because the integrity of it's been jeopardized after we sent a team down to New Jersey to inspect it, which is where the port it came into, which is a different story that I was involved in. But anyway, and then so we said, okay, can't do it. So we had to try to figure out, what do we do? So we had to figure out, how are we going to get a new one made, which is going to take 9 months, and then get it all manufactured, put together, and to our customer. Because guess what? If it's late to our customer, guess what our late fees are? $1 million a day for every day that we don't deliver on time. That doesn't happen on my watch, all right? So we need to think about, how do we backtrack it? So we had to mess with some of the customer timelines, move some things around in the shop, and we were able to get something that usually will take 18 to 24 months out. And I think it was, we moved some things around in the supply chain. We had to, it's way too complex for you guys. But long story short, problem solving is a big deal. We ended up not getting any LDs, and we were able to really, supply chain really stepped up and saved the day when, storms happen. So you have to prepare for all those kinds of scenarios. Problem solving is important, especially when you get to the leadership level, when you're trying to think about, okay, what do we do with our manufacturing space? What do we do in regards to the whole make or buy decision? A lot of that stuff is really important, but that really, problem solving is really a big source of competitive advantage for a company in regards to the talent that they hold, because the talent that a company has is really what's going to help them to do really well. All right, this is another thing that I talked to you guys about. Professionals should be adept at managing ambiguity. There's a lot of uncertainty that goes on. We don't necessarily know what's going to be going on in 2 weeks or 2 days. You never know when a storm's going to hit. You never know when there's going to be, a customer or a supplier may not be able to ship their things on time. Maybe, an area of the shop, a machine goes down. You never know when, a transport might have an issue. There's all kinds of things. So you have to figure out, okay, how do I manage ambiguity? How do I manage uncertainty? It's commonplace in a lot of markets, so you need to make sure that it's not going to stress you out and, drive you crazy to think about, okay, I've built my tolerance for ambiguity up, and I'm going to take on whatever comes at me, and you're going to be able to kind of operate in a way where you may not necessarily have all the answers to all the problems, but you need to be able to operate in that space. And that's one thing that I encourage you guys to do. I'm here to help and to guide you, but I really try to put it into your court so you guys can really operate. And I'm here. I hope you guys saw that with the ethics presentation. Those of you that came in, I want you guys to try, but I'm definitely here to help point you guys in the right direction. So tolerance for ambiguity is a major skill. I want you guys to be conscious about trying to develop now for yourselves while you're in school. And then last is a global mindset. If you've not traveled internationally, I encourage you to. I love to see the way that people live around the world, but it's basically more of a way of being rather than a set of managerial skills. All right, you have to think about having a diverse amount of experiences, perceptions, insights, and be able to effectively manage and compete in this globally oriented economy. I know that I could not operate with the people I worked with in Asia or China, Japan, Korea, the same way that I worked with people that were in France, Germany, UK, Switzerland, and even Poland was different. Very, very different ways that I had to manage and treat each and every one of them. And you have to be able to kind of understand and be adept at that. So here's a quick example for you, and I wish we were in class. I love to tell stories, but if you have a business card, for example, here's my little, this is not a business card, but we'll say it is. So you guys know that if you're in Asia, you can't say, "Hi, I'm Mandy Morell, nice to meet you." You can't just do that. That would be considered a big insult. What am I doing wrong? Some of you are yelling at the screen, you already know this. So when you meet somebody in Asia, you want to make sure that you give and do a little bow when you're handing your business card, because your business card is really a representation of who you are, and you're handing that person. So when somebody hands you a business card, you should also receive it with 2 hands, and then you place it down in front of you with due reverence. And then you place all your business cards in front of you in order of usually who's the highest ranking member. All right, I made the mistake one time of ranking things wrong, and I was quickly corrected. But that's what I need to do. So there's a lot of really cool things. Another thing that's exciting in dealing with, there's a supplier in Korean culture, and I loved him. His name was Mr. Kim. And when I first met him, the very first met him, he went like this to me, okay? Hand on the wrist, all right? Met me, did this, and we shook hands. And I'm like, what's this? What's this? And I didn't say anything at the time, but I went and figured it out. So I was doing research. When you meet, it's basically back in Korean days when they all had wear long robes and draping sleeves. They would consider how much they pull their sleeve back for you a sign of respect for you. Let me pull this down a little bit. So the first time I met Mr. Kim, here, all right, not much. You can see his wrist. Not really, kind of like, I'm not impressed. Yeah, well, I get it. I'm more of a results person than a show person anyway. You guys are getting to know that about me. All right, so first time I met him there. Second time I met him, we'd worked together for 3 or 4 months. Here, shook my hand. It was fantastic, all right? Third time we met a year or so later, I was at the elbow, all right? So you shake it like this. And then the last time I saw Mr. Kim, it was one of the greatest times. I'd worked with him for probably about 5 or 6 years. He met me and went like this. So he would have pulled his sleeve back all the way and shook my hand. And at that point in time, we'd become friends. I had dined with him. I'd gotten to hear about his family. And so he respected me not only as a colleague, but as a friend. Having that kind of mindset, we don't do that stuff here, but having to be able to operate in that environment and understand it and respect it is very important. All right, I could tell stories all day. A couple more things I want to share with you guys. As I mentioned, there's a massive supply chain demand out there. The big drivers of that shortage of talent, people don't know about it, as I told you. Historically, supply chain hasn't really been important in the organization. I told you guys that's changed a lot, especially with globalization and the make-buy decision, and especially now with Amazon and the internet, that's definitely changed. So historically, people don't think the best about supply chain. Now it's kind of a big deal, all right? And like I said, there's a shortage of supply chain faculty and academic programs, and I'm really, pray for me, fingers crossed, hoping to bring a supply chain program to Point Loma in the next couple of years. All right, so I'm not all sunshine and roses. Let me tell you guys the challenges as well. Supply chain is unique. It has a lot of unique demands. It's a bridging function. I told you guys it's a spider web. You work with everybody, but there's a lot of challenges that we deal with as well. There's a lot of competitive pressure. Can somebody make it faster than you or cheaper than you? All that stuff is pressure that comes on the supply chain. Globalization is a big deal. There's always constant downsizing that goes on. We worked in the power business, which is very cyclical, so we would lay off a bunch of people and hire a bunch of people, lay them off and hire them off, depending on what's going on. Always a cost reduction focus. Usually most companies try to do 2 to 3% a year. You'd be like, no, we need to take 10% out a year, and we're going to do it next year too. And so that's always a pressure. Sustainability, as I mentioned, natural disasters, as I shared, those things are big issues, and then also these mass retirements. So I've talked about a lot of these challenges already with you guys, but I look at them as opportunities. A couple things to share with you guys that I think is important. How do we keep people in supply chain? That's kind of the big thing. We want people that are going to go into supply chain and have that really good career satisfaction. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, but a lot of times people don't necessarily, that they do leave the supply chain, it's because a lot of times senior management doesn't understand the supply chain. I think that's quickly changing, but historically, if you don't have the support of senior management, it's really, really hard to be effective in the supply chain and help the company. So that can lead people to change. And if you don't have that support, you could be working at long hours, it can be stressful, and there's a lot of constant changes. So that's why I said that tolerance for ambiguity is important. But being able to select and maintain people in the supply chain is really a big deal, because honestly, supply chain is, a lot of research for this, high level of career satisfaction in the supply chain. Usually 84% of people that work in supply chain say they like it. Almost no other career has that level of satisfaction. Why? Well, there's intrinsic and extrinsic factors, okay? Salary is a significant factor because there is this shortage, because supply chain is so important. The salary is very high. You can really do a great starting salary and you can really shoot right up very quickly. It's one of the top careers for women, which I love. And honestly, there's a lot of intrinsic things as well. You can really make an impact and see the results just in a short period of time of the things that you've done. And I love that you can really see the positive things that you've done quickly. So that's one thing, reasons that I really love about supply chain. Supply chain and millennials, I know you guys are mostly Gen Z, but the things that we researched that millennials and Gen Z were looking for were opportunities for advancement. It has that. Good job satisfaction, it has that. Good company culture, that's more individualistic. But a good salary, job security, training provided, challenging, interesting work are all those things that sound like you're looking for in your future career, because those are the things that supply chain offers. All right, guys, so I just want to say, if you're interested in learning more about a career in supply chain, come talk to me. You can visit careersinsupplychain.org. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for considering a career in supply chain. Have a great day.